Hey everybody, as I'm sure you know by now, more than a quarter of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz, but so do all kinds of other consumer goods and food and fertilizer, and this literally has shipping companies and shipping executives around the world scrambling to try to navigate uncertain waters. And Farid Belbouab is the group chief executive officer of Gulftainer, which is a large regional ports and logistics operator in the UAE and across the region. Farid?
And obviously, as much as you have all sort of business continuity plan, Tony, you're never prepared, obviously, for such I would say, such a crisis. I mean, as much as, of course, the logistic and shipping industry has been navigating through and all sort of disruptions, and this one obviously was probably not on our checklist, neither on my actually on my job description, Tony. But the first obviously response obviously that we've been initiating is and primarily ensuring the safety of our people. And the first day of the crisis, I can probably share a bit. That's not actually just a history, but that's actually again the kind of checkup that we do regularly is go to the port and what do you have in hands now, what resources, what manpower, what systems will make you somewhat resilient. So the very first thing the very first step was obviously putting in place a plan, and the plan was pretty clear. So making sure again that and making sure that the cargo obviously get to discharge and move from Horfakan. Horfakan has it's a phenomenal region surrounded by mountains, so it's not like you can expand your capacity overnight. So we had to make sure that the vessels obviously get to berth, but the cargo as well get evacuated, and that comes obviously with actually a high degree of coordination, with the support of all the industry players, and from customs to the port authority to the shipping players, because also ensuring the service continuity while actually missiles and drones are flying above our heads, and is not an easy task. So prior to the war, Horfakan was acting as as a transshipment platform. 95% of the volumes were actually purely transshipment. 5% were gateway, import and export. So those 5% became eventually today 100%. And those 5% were 2,000 containers before the war.
So let me just jump in. Let me jump in on you there, Farid, because I want to make sure people understand what you're talking about. So Horfakan, explain its geography and the port that you got access to and how it helped you to literally circumvent the Strait of Hormuz.
Yes. So Horfakan, along with Fujairah, are two of the critical national gateway assets which sit outside of the Strait of Hormuz. And Horfakan is obviously the largest one, particularly operating all the container flows. So the asset was primarily designed for transshipment flows, which actually we have been serving for more than 30 years in the region. So, but eventually with the crisis, we had to turn this asset to accommodate inbound flows, import flows, particularly essential items such as, food, perishables, pharmaceutical products, refrigerated containers, because all what you have to do, obviously, in this period of crisis is to make sure that actually you can still find, your tomatoes and onions and or a can of tuna on your stall in the supermarket, because that's obviously the most.
That's right, but it's also even more urgent than that, because as we saw with the war in Ukraine, correct, there was food scarcity or high food prices that put people that were already in vulnerable positions in a worse position, right? So transport of food is important. So to ask you about having that redundancy, right? So what do you think is critical for shipping and supply chain executives right now to be thinking about when it comes to avoiding the kind of risk and negative consequences that we've seen with Strait of Hormuz?
I will say anyone involved in supply chain in any circumstances has obviously to deal with adaptability, being flexible. Response actually do not necessarily require perfect conditions. It requires obviously a sustained efforts with systems, with processes. And Khan clearly now has proven that relying on the Strait of Hormuz actually on its own is a risk. And this is actually now obviously what we have illustrated, that having that alternative logistic corridor through the eastern coast of the UAE has been playing a vital role. Not only for the UAE, by the way, but as well for the entire GCC region. And in a matter of 2 months, we moved over 250,000 containers. So prior to the crisis, we were doing 100 trucks on a daily basis. As of now, we are managing 7,000 trucks on a daily basis. So building infrastructure obviously is a must, and the rail networks and the expansion of the ports is important, but also the ecosystem with inland logistic hubs is also of paramount, because you want to make sure that your port is just acting as a staging area. Cargo cannot stay in the port in such a circumstance, because you don't want obviously to face tomorrow congestions for the ships, for the cargo owners. So in matter of couple of days, we built a 70 hectares actually dry port facility located at 80 kilometers from the port, where as of now cargo can be cleared and transferred and cleared smoothly without creating any bottleneck on the supply chain with the port. And that's, I think, what is being required from us as leaders is to be solution driven and being able obviously to adapt, building as well the digital infrastructure, because we have made massive use of AI tools and in this crisis, and how to identify a cargo which carries essential items against non-essential items. So in matter of couple of seconds, AI agents actually were screening ships, cargo, and determining actually what is the level of I would say of critical items and food within that ship, and connecting it obviously with the UAE somewhat inventory, to make sure again that actually we don't play with with a thin line when it comes obviously to those critical items, Tony.
Understood. And so, as you've referred to, this isn't the first time supply chains have had a challenge or seen disruption. And unfortunately, over the past several years, we had the COVID pandemic, which obviously disrupted supply chains. Then, as I'd mentioned before, the war in Ukraine, and now this. So do you think that companies like yours have learned to be more resilient? Were you able to respond faster because we had seen those disruptions before, or is it always a new challenge?
Tony, we are not geopolitician experts, so I cannot make the commitment that tomorrow there will be no war or no disruption, of the strait. But what I can make actually as a commitment is that we are actually today much more prepared actually to adapt to those crises, because trade eventually always finds its flow. That has been the nature, of the commerce, and the trade, exchange in this world. And in a couple of days, we built our own shipping line. So Gulftainer actually runs as well its own shipping line, actually subsidiary with 9 ships, and all. This was done to make sure that again we continue to serve in the and of course the UAE market. To some extent as well the GCC market, but all those critical items to make sure that we do not lack of anything. But as of today, we get to ship polypropylene and polyethylene for customers like Borouge from ADNOC, because we have, of course, to support the economy, and that's what I refer to. Resilience is not just a concept; it's a mindset. It's as well about having an organization which is agile, and we are learning obviously. And COVID has been the greatest test in our industry. So and we came stronger, I believe, from this, Tony.
So you mentioned Make It in the Emirates, and also that resilience is a mindset, and those two things kind of nicely blend together. So to explain to people, Make It in the Emirates is an event that took place in the past few days, huge gathering of people, investors, entrepreneurs, of course, very bullish on investment in the UAE and in the Gulf region. Do you think that this moment geopolitically and the war will be a long-term setback? Do you think that people will look beyond the risk and stay with investment at this time? And how are you viewing it in your perspective?
I know, Tony, the UAE itself, has been built, on challenges, it was difficult, obviously, to find water, food, we are surrounded by deserts and dunes. So the UAE, learned obviously about dealing with challenges. So we are not at our first crisis, somewhat. And I mean, the if you look at again the position of the UAE, I think we are definitely turning this crisis into an opportunity. I must say, that we, the fact that we were able, to turn the entire eastern coast to a new logistic corridors with eventually new industrial zone and logistic park, which will be flourishing, and where we have already registered interest from logistic players, but as well manufacturers from the east and the west, is actually an illustration of that resilience. So what I can tell you is the strength, obviously, and relies very much on the position of the UAE, where actually we get to face the Arabian Gulf, but as well the Indian Ocean. Outside of the Strait of Hormuz. I think the resilience of its leadership. That shows obviously that everyone is Emirati. And third, obviously, the resilience of its people. So that's what makes obviously the UAE. Still probably the most attractive place to invest in, Tony.
Farid Belbouab, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you.